If there's anyone with a finger on the pace of change in American business, you would expect it to be an editor running a magazine with the word fast right there on the cover. And you would be right. Add to that a resume that also includes stints with Money Magazine, Time Magazine, and Fortune Magazine, and you would have a journalist with a truly remarkable perspective on the businesses of America and the world. Today, under Robert Safian's leadership, monthly business magazine Fast Company has made it its editorial business to profile, analyze, and define businesses with the capacity to thrive in environments that change rapidly with little predictability. Safian has kept a keen eye on how that pace of change influences the way consumers view the world around them and what that means for us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the editor and managing director of Fast Company, Robert Safian.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Safian.
Well, that was very nice. Thank you, Andy. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Do you have bratwurst at lunch? As planned? It's nice to be here with you. I'm going to start with a little story, a little bit of an old-fashioned story. It's a story about a border guard at a sleepy border station between two countries where nothing very much happens. But one day, he sees pedaling towards him on a bicycle a young man, and balanced on the handlebars of the bike is a cardboard box. Now, this makes the border guard suspicious. So as the young man comes towards him, he stops him, he says, "Hey, what's in the box?" And the guy says, "Sand." He says, "Sand? Like from the beach?" "Yeah, sand." Border guard doesn't buy it. "Open the box." He opens the box, he looks inside, what does he see? Sand. He puts his hands through it, he feels nothing but sand. So he lets the young guy go on his way. The next day, around the same time, again, he sees the same young man pedaling towards him, and again, balanced on the handlebars, a cardboard box. Again, he stops him. Contraband, there's something in there. What's in the box? Sand. Looks through it again, nothing but sand. This continues this way every day for 6 months. Every day, the same young man pedaling towards him. Again, the box on the handlebars, he stops him, says, "What's in the box?" Sand, goes through it, nothing but sand, and lets him go on his way. And then after 6 months, it stops. And the border guard kind of forgets about it. And then several weeks later, he's off duty, and he's in his town square, and he sees the young man there at the corner cafe, and he's buying people drinks. He's looking very affluent, and the border guard says, I got to figure out what was going on, right? So he goes up to the young man, he says, "I don't know if you remember me, I'm the border guard from the station, I'm off duty, I'm not going to do anything, but I have to know, why were you bringing sand into the country?" And the young man looks up at him and says, I wasn't bringing in sand, I was bringing in bicycles, right? Yeah, it kind of grows on you, right? Now listen, the moral of this story is not simply to think outside the box, right? The moral of this story is that today in business, in our lives, we all tend to focus sometimes too much on the sand, on the box, and we miss the bicycle, right? We miss the big things, the larger things that are going on around us. So what are the things that we most want to pay attention to if you want to be, your enterprise to be what my magazine calls a fast company, creative and innovative? What's most important about that for you to keep in mind? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about for the next couple minutes. And the term I use to talk about this is Generation Flux. And Generation Flux refers to two things. It refers to the era that we live in now, a time of rapid, high-velocity change that shows very little signs of slowing down. And it also refers to an attitude that is increasingly pervasive among young people in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, millennials, and others, right? And this attitude has dramatic implications for how we interact with consumers, how we interact with our companies, what kind of marketing we do. This spreads across our culture. Now, to best understand this idea of Generation Flux, I'm going to go back a little. I'm going to use my magazine as a tool for going through this. Fast Company was launched in the late 90s as part of a raft of magazines associated with this idea of the new economy. Anyone remember this idea, right? The new economy? The idea was that with the rise of the internet, all the old rules of business had changed, and there were new rules. And if you just followed those rules, all kinds of things were possible, right? Fast Company extolled this in cover stories like Free Agent Nation and The Brand Called You, right? The idea was we had new control over our lives, we had new control over our careers, we could all day trade in our living rooms and get rich, right? We all know what happened at the end of this era in the late 90s. The dot-com bubble burst. The idea of the new economy was thoroughly discredited. All of the media associated with the new economy, industry standard, red herring, business 2.0, no longer exists. Fast Company is the only one that survived. And it's natural to look back at those days and see it as something of a mirage, right? But I don't view it that way. I think of it more as a premonition, as a whiff of the days to come of what I like to call the Age of Flux. Because so many of the things that were predicted back then in the late 90s have now indeed come to pass, and we live in a mobile, social, global, interconnected world where the old rules really don't apply anymore. The key difference between back then and today, between the days of the new economy and the Age of Flux, is that back then we thought we knew what the new rules were, right? We thought we knew what it would take to survive, to thrive, and today, if we're honest with ourselves, we recognize that we really have no idea what the rules are, that things are moving that fast, and that we are really living in a time of chaos, of chaotic change. And what is chaotic? This is a Fast Company's cover a few years ago. Mark Zuckerberg on the cover. Facebook had 19 million users when we did this story. Today it has 1.3 billion across the globe. I'd like to say that I knew that Mark and Facebook would be the world-changing juggernauts that they've become. Right? I didn't, but we did feel like that social media was an important issue to spread to our readers, and Mark provided a compelling backstory as a way to do that. And many of you saw the movie The Social Network. Really nice movie. That was kind of the story, part of the story that we told, a story with a natural human appeal, in the same way as it turns out that his product has a natural human appeal. And whether you're talking about Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, a whole bunch of these utilities, we forget that they've become so ubiquitous so quickly that just a few years ago they didn't exist at all, right? Vapor. And now they're deeply embedded in everything we do. This is an example of the kind of chaotic change that we're living through. What else is chaotic? The iPhone. Andy mentioned this earlier, right? But you go back 5 or 6 years, the global smartphone market was dominated by 3 companies. Nokia, RIM, the makers of BlackBerry, and Motorola. Right? These are not the companies we talk about anymore. Instead, we're talking about Apple and Samsung at the top of that industry. Now, that kind of swap at the top ranks of a global business of multi-billion-dollar scale, that's unprecedented. It's absolutely unprecedented. But in today's world, it's not alone, right? Because all across the economy and all around the world, there are new entrants and new changes that are disrupting the way we do all kinds of things. You guys are living through this every day. Andy mentioned Netflix, which is an example I love, right? They come out and they disrupt a blockbuster, force blockbuster into bankruptcy. Then the television networks and cable stations are threatened, so they start doing video on demand. You have HBO streaming, so Netflix comes back and starts doing its own programming to compete with them, right? A few years ago, if you said Woody Allen was available on Amazon, you would be saying you could get a DVD set on Amazon, right? Now he's producing shows for Amazon. Complete changes, right? You see this in the music area, iTunes, streaming services like Pandora and Spotify and Beats. You see it with the rise of electric car company Tesla, self-driving cars from Google, autonomous driving features in really almost all new cars coming out today, right? Toyota has a fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell car coming out this year. You see it in the education area with the rise of online courses that millions of people are taking. MIT puts all of its course materials online for free for people, right? In the healthcare area, you've got robotic surgeries, mobile MRIs, DNA tests that you can get from your home for just $100 to uncouple your whole DNA, right? On the global front, the number of cell phones in Africa is up by more than 500% in the last few years. 500%, right? In refugee camps, people will go without food before they go without their phones. It's true. From Hong Kong to the Middle East, we have political changes being forced by and encouraged by social media. You put all of this together, and this is not the hyperbole of the late 90s. This is real, this is tangible, and this is broad, right? And this brings me back to this idea of Generation Flux. Because Generation Flux is a generation that has grown up in this environment. That the things that to others of us may seem chaotic and changing and disruptive, that's normal for them. That is what they experience. It's what they are used to. It's what they desire. It's what they want, right? And as brands, as businesses, They're very attuned to who is authentically engaged in that world with them and who's faking it, who's fighting it, right? That authenticity means so much. Did a cover story last year called Find Your Mission. It sort of touched on this area about brands that need to operate by a standard, by a consistent standard across. Right? This is a cover we did recently, The World's Most Innovative Companies. That's the co-CEO of Warby Parker, which is disrupting the eye care industry. Right? It's a company created by millennials for millennials. They have a very highly attuned design sense that's part of their brand. Right? Very, very highly attuned customer service and a social impact element, all connected across. And one of my favorite examples on this is Chipotle, right? Chipotle, which is unified by this phrase of food with integrity. And it defines their menu, it defines their sourcing, it defines their supply chain, it defines their marketing. It's allowed them to cut across access across traditional demographics, age groups, gender, ethnic background, geographic location, right? And they're allowed to drive a premium price across because they have this authentic connection across to these customers at a time when competitors like McDonald's are really suffering. Now, the good news for all of us is that if you want to be a member of Generation Flux, you can be. It is not something that is defined strictly by demographics, but much more by attitude. We can all learn to be Gen Flux if we're open to it, right? And I'm going to borrow something from a professor at Stanford, Carol Dweck, about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? And those of us with a fixed mindset, we believe that once we become adults, we sort of are who we are, right? The you can't teach an old dog new tricks idea comes out of this, right? And someone with a fixed mindset, when they are confronted with something new, their reaction might be, well, that's interesting, but it's not really for me. I'm not really that engaged in it. Doing that would be embarrassing. That's often a detriment, right? Often the reaction. Someone with a growth mindset looks at things differently. When they see new things, they recognize that in the beginning, they're not going to be good at it, right? When they do it, they will be bad at it. It will be embarrassing to do these things. But they believe that they can learn it, and that belief and passion, along with a lot of hard work, allows them to build new areas of mastery, new areas of comfort, new areas of authenticity. So I want to give you an example of someone who is not instinctively perhaps a member of Generation Flux, but who can illuminate this idea of growth mindset. My good friend Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, this is the way Arnold Schwarzenegger burst onto the scene, very successful, but in a very narrow area as a bodybuilder, and he decided he wanted to become an actor. Now, without looking at your mobile devices, does anyone remember what Arnold's first feature film was? First feature film. Hercules in New York. Give that man a beer. Hercules in New York. You can stream this movie online, by the way. If you do decide to stream this movie, I defy you to watch it for more than 5 minutes. Okay? It is really, you look at the reviews, worst movie ever made, a complete vacuum of talent. This is the absolute definition of embarrassing. But Arnold didn't quit, right? And he may not have won any Oscars, but he got a lot better. This is him. He became an international superstar. This is him in the Terminator, the first Terminator movie. And then he decided he wanted to do something else. He wanted to go into politics. Right? And the pundits, and I would count myself among them, said, this guy, you've got to be kidding. And he became the governor of the state of California. Now, I bring up Arnold not to endorse his politics or endorse his movies or extol his moral values, right? But I bring him up to remind us all of what is possible when we embrace change, when we embrace what the future can bring to us, right? When we try to get out of the connections that draw us, the nostalgia that draws us to the past. Nostalgia is a natural human emotion, right? It is comforting, but in times of chaotic change like this, it's not helpful. It prevents us from embracing the new that we need to indulge in. And the customers of Generation Flux who we want to reach, they are not nostalgic for that. They are emotionally engaged in the change that we are a part of. If you truly want to accelerate, right, You need to become part of this generation and be open to the changes, embrace them, even however uncomfortable they may be. All right, I've come to the end. I'm going to give you one last thought, one last quote. It's from 150 years ago, and it's from a paraphrase from the father of evolution, Charles Darwin. And it goes like this: it's not the strongest of the species that survives. It's not the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. And if there's any single message that's most important in dealing with Generation Flux and our future, it's that. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much.